We're going to start today's show with some clips from Bret Weinstein. Yesterday, we started the show with clips of his brother, Eric Weinstein, who's an economist and mathematician. Bret, of course, was, a professor at Evergreen State, the most lefty progressive college in all of the United States, and most of you know his story already. He's been on the show many times. About 6 years ago or so, Evergreen decided to have a day where they would uninvite white kids to campus in the name of tolerance. Bret made the point of saying, well, that's kind of racist. And he and his wife, Heather Hying, who is also a professor at Evergreen, they were basically violently chased off campus, and neither one of them have their tenured jobs at Evergreen anymore. So Bret has kind of woke up politically, a lefty most of his life. He's also been very red-pilled as it came to COVID and a bunch more. Anyway, he went on the Joe Rogan podcast. Have you heard of this Joe Rogan guy? And he talked about what is going on right now with Donald Trump and this ever-growing movement that I've been talking about.
Well, which is one of the reasons why they're so terrified of Trump. There's a certain amount of the stealing they can do. If let's imagine if it is dirty and you really can manipulate elections, how much can you manipulate by? Can you manipulate it by 30%? You know, because we don't know.
To your point about how much can they cheat, I call that factor, which none of us can put a number on. Maybe they can.
Right.
I call it the cheat factor, right? The cheat margin. And one of the things that I'm trying to convince people of is that it's not hopeless because they can cheat, but it means that you have to succeed at a level that exceeds their capacity to erase it.
Right. So that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about like maybe they can cheat by 10%.
Right. And what we know, and I think actually we owe Trump a huge debt of gratitude for proving something that I couldn't have told you if it was true before he won the presidency, which is there still enough democracy left in the system for something to upend the plan? Right? Because he was clearly off narrative.
Right.
And he did become president. So he did something for us that I don't know anybody else who could have done it.
Okay, so I want to hit the last point first, that Trump won once already when nobody said he could. Do not forget that. In 2015, as we were rolling into that 2016 election, everyone said he could not win, and he did. That was the blip in the system. That was the aberration in the system. That seems to be why the system is trying to make sure that it cannot happen again. There you have Joe Rogan and Bret Weinstein talking about election interference and everything else. These are things you couldn't even talk about on YouTube a couple years ago. So again, whatever remains of the free internet, enough of us talking about stuff allows more of us to talk about it, right? Because they can't ban and shadow ban and silence and censor and delete everybody. They can't. They can do it to an awful lot of people, and they can do things we don't know, but they can't do it to everybody. So there you have the world's largest podcaster being like, so what can we do to avoid the cheat? What can we do to avoid the steal? Bret calls it the cheat margin. And it's interesting because I agree with Bret, a guy who did not vote for Trump. It's like, you need to overload the system this time. You have to make sure that it's not so close they can do this or that or the other thing. You have to overwhelm the system so that it becomes so obvious that it cannot not happen. You need a blowout. I think that was what Rogan said. You need a blowout. I want to throw to one other clip because they talked about what would happen. And this is the bigger part. Why do I keep talking about this Big Ten thing? What gets us out of this? Look, if Trump becomes president again, I get it. There will be a certain amount of people, they're going to think Hitler's back and they'll burn down the cities and they're going to always hate everything any Republican would do and all of that stuff. But imagine if he won in a blowout, and not only won in a blowout, but won in a blowout where RFK came along and Tulsi Gabbard came along and guys like me and some of you guys and someone like Joe Rogan and someone like Bret Weinstein. Like, suddenly it starts looking like the biggest, sort of widest panoply of what America could be. And imagine what might be if that happened. Here's Bret.
I don't know. I do think unity is the right message. I think this is exactly the moment at which people do come together because many people feel the jeopardy. I sincerely hope that what President Trump discovered when he brought Bobby Kennedy on board continues to grow in his mind, because I think actually he has the potential to lead a massive movement to restore the republic and make it function, and that would be, I think it would be wonderful for him. I think he would go down in history as not the polarizing figure that people seem intent on turning him into, but he would go down in history as a galvanizing figure, as really a refounder of the country. I know that will be hard for many people who have thought ill of him to swallow, but I don't know what you think, but the joining of the Trump campaign and Bobby Kennedy
and Tulsi.
Okay, so it's all the stuff that I've been talking about for a long time, and it could be happening right now. And I do think, I'll one-up you on that one, Bret. I do think Donald Trump is hearing it. I think it is extremely obvious. I think that's exactly why he brought RFK on board. I think that's exactly why he was clearly talking to Tulsi and figuring out maybe she could be part of this or whatever. I think it's why Elon is now seeing this thing in Donald Trump. Like, this is the chance. And if Trump hears that message loud and clear, you could be part of the refounding of America. Enough of the wokeness, enough of the never-ending globalist giant government nonsense, enough of the endless lies and all of that. It's like Trump is genuinely the last chance. And that's a hell of a script. It's a hell of a thing to be said. I want to show you one other of Bret. This actually took place in August on the PBD podcast, but Phoenix showed it to me this morning, and I thought it really drives home the point that Bret was making in the previous video of how we can restore this thing.
That clip is interesting. They validated exactly what it was he was describing, which was a fake world that's presented over our screens by these mega monolith corporations that decide what we get to know and when we get to know it. And then to have CNN cut away, not able to engage in their usual level of stagecraft because they don't know what he's going to say is incredible. I was very interested in the way he navigated the idea. This was not a simple endorsement of Trump. This was an endorsement of retaking the White House and using that position to restore the republic to its proper course.
Does this cause a guy like you to be open to the idea of voting for Trump versus Kamala?
Oh, absolutely. Let me just be perfectly clear about this. I think the modern Democratic Party is an existential threat to the Republic. And although I am a Democrat, I've been a Democrat my whole life, the party that I see in front of me today is literally the inverse of the party I signed up for. This is now the party of war. This is the party of racism. This is the party of censorship. I don't recognize this party. There is no conceivable scenario in which I would vote for Kamala Harris. I just simply will not do it. Am I open to voting for Trump? I am. I'm especially open to it if he is partnered with Bobby Kennedy, because what that tells me is that my values, which are a much closer match for Bobby's, are represented in that administration. And that's really what I want. I want a coalition to redefine American politics because, frankly, we have a long-standing problem with corruption, which has now turned into something else.
Okay, I said it yesterday, but Ronald Reagan, some 50-odd years ago, who had been a Democrat, maybe even more than 50 years ago at this point, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me.